Okay, that is share. Okay, fine. I'm turning up now. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yes. Eti Chancha Karapumsa. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam. Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Shri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the theists. Tatra Visheshamaha. So, in this regard, having given this list, Srila Swami notes that there is a specific point to be noted, there is an exception to be noted. Pumsaha Parameshwarasya Kechit Amshaha Kechit Kala Vibhutayascha. Some of them are the Supreme Lord's portions or portions of portions. Tatra Matsyadinam Avatarattvena Sarvagyatva Sarvashaktimatve Api Yatha Upayogameva Jnana Kriya Shakti Avishkaranam. In this regard, Matsya and the others, even though as incarnations of the Lord, they possess, they are omniscient and they possess all potencies, still they only reveal that amount of knowledge, um, activity, potency as required. Kumara Narada Adishu Adhikari Keshu Yathopayogam Amshatkala Aveshaha. And amongst eligible living entities such as the Kumaras, Narada Muni, there is an avesha or an empowerment of the plenary portions and portions of the plenary portions as much as is required. Tatra Kumara Adishu Jnana Aveshaha. In this regard, the Kumaras and so on are empowered with knowledge, spiritual knowledge. Pritva Shakti Aveshaha. Prithu and so on are empowered with capacity to maintain and so on. Krishnastu Bhagavan Sakshat Narayana eva. But Krishna is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana himself. Avishkrita Sarvashaktitva. Because he has exhibited all of his potencies. Sarvesham Prayojana Maha. And then the goal of all of these incarnations are then stated. Indrarayaha Daityaha Tairvyakulam Upadrutam Lokam Mridayanti Sukhinam Kurvanti. They please the world that is disturbed by Indra's enemies, that is the Daityas. So Srila Swami gives the seed for explaining the concept of Swayam Bhagavan. Krishna is the original form of the Supreme Lord. ultimately the word Narayana refers to Krishna only, as Baladev Vidyabhushan has also explained. There is one Narayana Upanishad which talks about the glories of Lord Narayana. And then it says, Brahmanyo Devaki Putra. While describing Narayana, it says, this Narayana is the supreme Brahman, is described in the Vedas, which is Shabda Brahma, and is the son of Devaki. So Narayana is also a direct name of Krishna. That is, there are many such names of Lord Vishnu, which are actually directly names of Krishna. You have to read Laghu Bhagavatamrita to see several instances that Rupa Goswami gives for this. Very interesting. Okay. Prabhupada. In this particular stanza, Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is distinguished from other incarnations. He is counted amongst the avatars incarnations because out of his causeless mercy, the Lord descends from his transcendental abode. Avatarati iti avataraha. An avatara is one who descends into the realm of the sense perception of conditioned souls. So, because Swayam Bhagavan himself descends, he is also referred to as an avatar because he also descends to the sense perception of the conditioned souls. So, sometimes he comes, sometimes he empowers others. Krishna himself manifests all of his opulence, of all of the 6 features of Godhead. They are partly manifested amongst his expansions, but they are fully manifested by him. This is the sense in which we say Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has elaborately described it in his commentary to this verse. That when you say that Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajnanam advayam, you say there is one absolute truth. And it is well known that the absolute truth is one unbroken substance. So then where is the question of part and part of a part and so on? So then he explains what it means. It simply means that he manifests a part of his potencies in a specific form. So that form is referred to as a plenary portion, Swa Amsha, an integrated portion, to be distinguished from the Jivatmas who are separated portions, Vibhinna Amsha. So it should not be misunderstood that actually these plenary portions cannot do anything in the literal sense. Rather, it simply means that Krishna in those forms has decided to never exhibit certain features, whereas in the Swayam Bhagavan form, he has decided to always exhibit those features. So this is the sense in which we have to understand the concept of original and expanded forms of Godhead. Parsuram Narasimha, they displayed opulence. Similarly, Narada, Varaha, Buddha, they created faith in the mass of people. Rama and Dhanvantari displayed his fame. Balaram, Mohini, Vamana displayed his beauty. Dattatreya, Matsya, Kurma, Kapila, they exhibited knowledge. Naranarayana, renunciation. But Krishna exhibited all of them. All of them. That is in fact very, very clear from one poem by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur called Swayam Bhagavata Ashtakam, where he points out how Krishna exhibited each of these 6 opulences. Srila Jiva Goswami has dedicated one full sandarbha to analyzing this particular verse. So, according to Srila Jiva Goswami's statement, in accordance with authoritative sources, Lord Krishna is a source of all other incarnations. It is not that Lord Krishna has any source of incarnation. All the symptoms of supreme truth in full are present in the person of Lord Shri Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord emphatically declares that there is no truth greater than or equal to himself. So he is not just Bhagavan, rather He is Swayam Bhagavan. It is Krishna who has expanded himself into various parts, portions, particles. Swayam Rupa, Swayam Prakasha, Tadekatma, Brabhava, Vaibhava, Vilasa, Avatar, Avesha. He's also expanded himself into the Jivatmas. So, those who are extremely learned in the scriptures, in spiritual subjects, have analyzed that Krishna has 64 primary qualities. These are personalities beginning with Srila Rupa Goswami. And all of these expansions, they only manifest some of these qualities. Actually, they exhibit most of these qualities. For instance, Brahma, he manifests up to 50 out of these 64 qualities. Then Lord Shiva exhibits up to 55 qualities. Of course, Brahma also doesn't exhibit all the 50 qualities in full, but to some extent. And Lord Shiva exhibits 55 of these qualities to a greater extent. And then 60 qualities are displayed by Lord Narayana. But Krishna exhibits them to a greater degree. And then, of course, he manifests all the 64 qualities. It should be understood that Krishna doesn't exhibit only 4 qualities. He exhibits 64 qualities. Here, Prabhupada gives us some information. Lord Shiva, who's neither avatar nor avesh, nor in between them, possesses almost 84% of the attributes. But the jivas, or the individual living beings in different statuses of life, possess up to the limit of 78% of the attributes. That is when he becomes a Brahma. Brahma is the highest. The position of Brahma is the highest within the conditioned souls. So he can come up to the point of exhibiting 50 out of 64 qualities. Bindu bindu taya. Little like droplets. Krishna is an ocean of these qualities. These 50 qualities also. The first 50 qualities. But Lord Brahma exhibits them to a small extent. Those qualities have also been spelled out in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Let me just quickly read it out. Very interesting. Ayam neta suramyang sarvasallakshananvita ruchira. Like that it goes on. So I'll simply read out the translations. Krishna, the supreme hero, has the most beautiful transcendental body. This body possesses all good features. It is radiant and very pleasing to the eyes. His body is powerful, strong, youthful. Krishna is the linguist of all wonderful languages. He is a truthful and very pleasing speaker. He is expert in speaking, and he is a very wise, learned scholar and a genius. Krishna is very expert in artistic enjoyment. He is highly cunning, expert, grateful, and firmly determined in his vows. He knows how to deal according to time, person, and country. And he sees through the scriptures and authoritative books. He is very clean and self-controlled. Lord Krishna is steady, his senses are controlled, and he is forgiving, grave, and calm. He is also equal to all. Moreover, he is magnanimous, religious, chivalrous, and kind. He is always respectful to respectable people. Krishna is very simple and liberal. He is humble and bashful. And he is a protector of the surrendered souls. He is very happy, and he is always the well-wisher of his devotees. He is all auspicious, and he is submissive to love. Krishna is very influential and famous. He is the object of attachment for everyone. He is a shelter of the good and the virtuous. He is attractive to the minds of women, and he is worshipped by everyone. He is very, very rich. Krishna is the supreme, and he is always glorified as the supreme Lord and controller. Thus, all the previously mentioned transcendental qualities are in him. The 50 qualities of the Supreme Godhead mentioned above are as deep as an ocean. In other words, they are difficult to fully comprehend. These qualities are sometimes very minutely exhibited in living beings, but they are fully manifested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Apart from these 50 qualities, there are 5 other qualities found in the Supreme Personality of Godhead that are partially present in demigods like Lord Shiva. These qualities are: the Lord is always situated in his original position. He is omniscient. He is always fresh and youthful. He is the concentrated form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And he is the possessor of all mystic perfection. There are another 5 qualities which exist in the Vaikuntha planets, in Narayana, the Lord of Lakshmi. These qualities are also present in Krishna, but they are not present in demigods like Lord Shiva or in other living entities. These are: the Lord possesses inconceivable supreme power. He generates innumerable universes from his body. He is the original source of all incarnations. He bestows salvation upon enemies he kills. He has the ability to attract exalted persons who are satisfied in themselves. Although these qualities are present in Narayana, the dominating deity of the Vaikuntha planets, they are even more wonderfully present in Krishna. Now here, this Hatari Gatidayaka, he gives liberation or salvation. They are to different degrees. In his Krishna form, he gives absolute liberation from material existence. Whereas when he comes in other Vishnu Tattva forms, he liberates them from their sinful reactions or from their degraded status. That's all. He doesn't award absolute liberation. That is reserved for his Krishna form, Swayam Bhagavan form. That has been demonstrated in Laghu Bhagavatamrita by Rupa Goswami. Apart from these 60 transcendental qualities, Krishna has an additional 4 transcendental qualities which are not manifested even in the personality of Narayana. These are: Krishna is like an ocean filled with waves of pastimes that evoke wonder within everyone in the universe. In his activities of conjugal love, he is always surrounded by his dear devotees who possess unequal love for him. He attracts the minds of all 3 worlds with the melodious vibration of his flute. His personal beauty and opulence are beyond compare. No one is equal to him, and no one is greater than him. Thus, the personality of God astonishes all living entities, both moving and non moving, within the 3 worlds. He is so beautiful that he is called Krishna. So, these are uh, here. Another. Above Narayana, Krishna has 4 specific transcendental qualities. His wonderful pastime. These are the last 4. An abundance of wonderful associates who are very dear to him, like the gopis. His wonderful beauty and the wonderful vibration of his flute. Lord Krishna is more exalted than ordinary living beings and demigods like Lord Shiva. He is even more exalted than his personal expansion, Narayana. In all, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has 64 transcendental qualities in full. So these are his 64 primary qualities that Prabhupada is referring to here. The living being can never possess attributes like Shiva, Vishnu, or Lord Krishna. A living being can become godly by developing the 78% transcendental attributes in fullness. In fullness means in fullness for him by his consideration. It is as full as he can get. It is not referring to the fullness of Lord Krishna. He cannot have the 50 qualities, which is 78%, which are to the degree that is as full as it is in Krishna. But he can never become a god like Shiva, Vishnu, or Krishna. He can become a Brahma in due course. So from this we understand that Brahma is the highest post also. Wait, let me get back. Where was I have to open. No, what is wrong? Something's wrong. Why does it do this? Yes. Okay, it's come back. Dent. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. जन्मगुह्यं भगवतो य एतत् प्रयतो नरः सायं प्रातर्गणन् भक्त्या दुःखग्रामात् विमुच्यते. एतत् कीर्तनफलमाह. Then he describes the result of reciting all of these. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord with devotion in the morning and in the evening gets relief from all miseries of life. Janmete, Gukhyam, Atirahastim Janma. So the Supreme Lord's birth are very mysterious. Prayataha, Shuchi his son. One who recites all of these after becoming pure, Dukkhagrama, samsara, becomes freed from samsara or transmigration, freedom from the cycle of birth and rebirth. So this is the same as Bhagavad Gita statement, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, Evam Yo Veti Tattvataha, Taktva Deham Punarjanma Naiti Mameti Sunarjanam. The Supreme Lord's birth and activities, they are mysterious. They're mysterious means only by those who carefully try to go deep into the matter by spiritual devotion is the mystery discovered. And then one can become liberated. Dukkha Gramat Vimuchyate. The word Vimuchyate is derived from the word Vimukti, liberation, final liberation. So this itself indicates that Krishna's births and activities in his various incarnations, they're all spiritual. Otherwise, why would one attain liberation by reciting them, by reciting descriptions of them? Certainly, by talking about a conditioned soul, no matter how exalted he is, one will not get liberation from material existence. But how it works is a mystery. And those who do not follow the prescribed regulations of devotion service are not entitled to enter into the mysteries of his births and activities. Etad rupam bhagavato hyarupasya chidatmanaha maya gunair virachitam mahadadibhir atmani. The conception of the Virat universal form of the Lord as appearing in the material world is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord's having form. But factually, the Lord has no material form. Vimuchyata इति यदुक्तं तत्र कथं देहद्वयसम्बन्धे सति तद्विमुक्तिर् इत्याशङ्क्य देहद्वयसम्बन्धस्य भगवन् मायोत्थ अविद्या विलसत्वात् एतत् श्रवणादिजनित विद्यया तन्निवृत्तिरुपपद्यते इत्याशयेनाह एतदिति पंचभिः. Okay, one gets freedom from material existence, but since we are connected with two bodies, the subtle body and the gross body, how can that liberation from the cycle of birth and rebirth take place. Anticipating this, he speaks 5 verses. Sutta Goswami speaks 5 verses, beginning with the current verse. He has this in his mind. The relationship the living entity has with the two bodies, the gross body and subtle body, are the effects, they are the natural effects of avidya, ignorance, which is produced by Maya, the Maya potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when one hears about the Supreme Lord, then that produces vidya, knowledge. Since knowledge neutralizes ignorance, then the relationship with the two bodies also ceases. So it is reasonable. With this in mind, he speaks these 5 verses. Arupasya chiddeka rasasya atmanaha jivasya etat sthulam rupam shariram Bhagavata ya maya tasya gunai mahadadi rupai virachitam Kwa atmani atmasthane shariram kritam ityartha. Sridhar Swami has explained this as follows. He translates this verse differently. He translates this verse to mean that the living entity, the Jivatma, the conditioned soul, he is actually fully spiritual. So he does not have any form, meaning he does not have any material form. So this form, meaning this body, referring to this gross body, this has been created using different features of Mahat Tattva and other elements, which are actually different features of Maya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead's Maya energy. Where is it created? Oh, it is created on the soul. In other words, it is superimposed on the soul. So he will continue to translate it like this. We will see how Prabhupada explains it. Prabhupada, he has translated differently following Srila Jiva Goswami's translation of this verse. Jiva Goswami has presented it like this. All of these forms, etat means these forms. Etat Rupam refers to the form of the Supreme Lord that we see with our eyes, which is a universe. So he has stated that this actually refers to the universal form. Both the translations are okay. So this refers to the Virat form, the universal form. And Srila Jiva Goswami mentions that this Vishwarupa, Virat form, that is not being mentioned as an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, because all the forms of the Supreme Lord are transcendental. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead has its own Sachidananda body, which is absolutely spiritual. Then what is this Virat Rupa, or this universal form? Oh, it is an authorized form for meditation. It is a Dhyaya Rupa. It is a form which is meant to be meditated upon. That's what it is. So what kind of form is it? We will see later on in the second canto what it refers to. It is actually a form that is meant to be meditated upon by superimposing the Supreme Lord's transcendental form with various features of material existence. But that is meant for neophytes in spiritual life. The neophytes cannot conceive of anything beyond matter. The material conception of the Lord is not counted in the list of his factual forms. Similarly, Prabhupada also takes into account Sridhar Swami's explanation. The present forms of the conditioned souls are also not factual. Both the Lord and the living beings are living spirits and have original spiritual bodies. Yatha nabhasi meghau go renurva parthivo nile evam drashtari drishyaptvam aropitam abuddhibhi. clouds and dust are carried by the air. But less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. कथमित्यपेक्षायां स्वरूप आवरणेन तत् अध्यासते इति सदृष्टान्तमाह यथेति. How is it that the living entity has a form which is so completely different? That is because the living entity's swarupa has been covered over, and in this manner it is superimposed on him. That is explained here with an example. The examples are as it is in the translation. एवं द्रष्टरि आत्मनि दृश्यत्वं दृश्यत्वादि धर्मकं शरीरम आरोपितम इत्यर्थः. So in that way, the living entity, which is actually the seer, has been superimposed with the body, which has the feature of being the seen, and so on. In other words, the living entity is so completely different from the gross body. Then he will explain it is also different from the subtle body. Similarly, even for this universe, there is the gross feature. There's also a subtle feature that Prabhupada will talk about. Prabhupada explains the logic behind referring to this universe as the Virat Rupa, or the universal form. How can you refer to the universe as the Supreme Lord? Prabhupada explains it. Those who want to see the Lord with their present material eyes or with the material senses are advised to meditate on the gigantic external feature called the Virat Rupa. For instance, when a particular gentleman goes in his car, which can be seen very easily, we identify the car with the man within the car. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, there is the president. Even though you can't see the president, he may be inside. And, he can see, but you can't see him. There are arrangements like that. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, there is the president. For the time being, we identify the car with the president. Similarly, less intelligent men who want to see God immediately without necessary qualification are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as a form of the Lord, although the Lord is within and without. In the first portion of his commentary, we see that Prabhupada is again referring to the living entity. Okay. अतः परम यद व्यक्तम अव्यूढ़ गुण ब्रह्मितम अदृष्टाश्रुत वस्तुत्वा सजीवो यद पुनर्भवः. Beyond this gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. I'm sorry. Return of my machine. The living being has his form beyond the subtlety. Otherwise, he could not have repeated births. So regarding text 32, Atah Param, Srila Swami notes, Kim cha atah sthulat rupat param anyadapi rupam aropitam ityanashanga. Not only is the gross body superimposed on the living entity, there is another form which is superimposed. Katham bhutam tad. What is the nature of that? Yada vyaktam, sukshma. That is unmanifested. That is subtle. Tatra hetu. And the reason why it is like that, avyudha guna vyuhitam. Avyudha guna brahmitam. It looks like there is a variant reading here, but the meaning is identical though. Vyuhitam brahmitam. It is because it is without formal shape. It is without formal shape, nor is it affected by the qualities. Okay. Vyuha, karakcharnadi parinamaha. Tasa avyuda aparinata ye gunaha taihi vyuhitam rachitam. So it does not have, it does not grow or decay like the gross hands, feet, and so on. See, the gross bodies, hands, feet, and so on, they disintegrate. Um, we grow old, the gross body changes, but the subtle bodies, hands, feet, they don't change like this. Akar Vishesha Rahitatvad Avyaktam Ityarthaha. And because it does not have a particular form like the gross form, it is said to be avyakta, unmanifested. Etadeva kutaha. And why is it like that? Adrishtashruta because it is unseen and unheard. Shuyate va indradivat. Idam tu na tata. And it is heard, just like we hear about demigods and so on. We hear from the scriptures. What is the evidence that it exists? Oh, we know that it exists because there is birth and rebirth. Because there is punarjanma, there is birth and rebirth. Sridhar Swami also points out that sometimes the subtle body itself is referred to as a jiva. For instance, it is stated that at the time of liberation, the jiva has to give up the jiva, meaning that he has to become freed from the subtle body. In other words, simply being freed from the gross body doesn't mean that you are liberated, because you have to take another birth. But when you become freed from the gross body and the subtle body, then you are freed from the cycle of birth and rebirth. Prabhupada explains it like this: the living being has a spiritual form beyond this gross material or subtle psychic existence. The gross body and psychic function cease to act as soon as the living being leaves the visible gross body. In fact, we say that the living being has gone away because he is unseen and unheard. We only know by breathing, but definitely the living entity reincarnates again and again. Anyway, the point is, the Lord is eternally existent in a form which is neither materially gross nor materially subtle, like the materially gross and materially subtle bodies of the living being. But the conception that the Supreme Lord has subtle material body or gross material body in the form of the universe, these conceptions are imaginary. The living being has his eternal spiritual form, which is conditioned only by his material contamination. Yatre me saddasadrupe pratishiddhe swasamvida avidyayatmani krite iti tad brahmadarshanam tadaivam upadhidvayamukva tat apavadena jivasya brahmadama. So having described the living entity as having two material designations. Technically, the expression is upadhi, material designation. Having described it, now he will describe in text 33 an exception. The living entity. The living entity is actually spiritual. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. Prabhupada has interestingly pointed out that when the living entity is in material existence, he is called Jiva Bhuta. Mamevamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. And when the living entity is fully liberated from material existence, he is called Brahma Bhuta. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Na Shochati Na Kankshati. So the living entity is actually fully spiritual. But right now he's stuck in material existence. Okay. So when he attains full liberation, then he becomes fully self-realized. Fully self-realized. He is able to perceive himself. He can clearly see that these coverings that he has in the form of the subtle body and then the gross body are creations of the ignorance feature of Maya, Vidya. Here, uh, the coverings take place due to ignorance. Such coverings are never effective in the person of the personality of Godhead. In other words, they do not cover the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Knowing this convincingly is called liberation or seeing the absolute. This means that perfect self realization is made possible by adoption of godly or spiritual life. Self realization means becoming indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies and becoming serious about the activities of the self. So, when we become fully spiritually realized, while in this life, we have attained the status called Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even in conditional existence. Now, this cannot be done artificially, but this can be done when one engages in devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. Because then the Supreme Lord, He will do the needful to liberate us. We cannot liberate ourselves by any amount of intellectual adjustment. When the living being desires to be an enjoyer of material energy, illusory phenomena, the Lord covers the living being in the mystery of forgetfulness, and thus the living being misinterprets the gross body and subtle mind to be his own self. And by culture of transcendental knowledge, when the living being prays to the Lord for deliverance from the clutches of forgetfulness, the Lord, by his causeless mercy, removes the living being's illusory curtain, and thus he realizes his own self. 34. यद्येषोपरतादेवी माया वैशारधीमतिः संपन्न एवेति विदुर्महिम्ने महिम्नि स्वे महीयते. If the illusory energy subsides and the living entity becomes fully enriched with knowledge by the grace of the Lord, then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and thus becomes situated in his own glory. Since the Maya potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a cause for the transmigration of the living entity, then how is it that the living entity is fully spiritual? So then he explains that Maya is actually a feature of the omniscient Supreme Lord. So when she stops her function, then this can happen. Ayam bhava. This is what is implied here. Yavadesha vidya atmana varna vikshepo karoti. As long as this Maya potency, it covers the living entity and it throws the living entity down. Tava no paramati. Until then she does not stop functioning. Yadatu saiva vidya rupena parinata. But when she transforms herself into the knowledge feature, tada saddasad rupam jivopadim dagdva. Then she burns up the gross and subtle material designations of the living entity. Nirindhana agnivat swayam eva uparamet iti. And then just as fire burns a fuel, and when the fuel is fully burnt, then the fire also subsides. So like that, that will also subside. Tada sampanno brahmaswarupam prapte eveti viduhu tattvagya. Then knowers of the truth understand that this person has attained full spiritual realization. So in that way, then the living entity shines its own worshipable glory. One point that Prabhupada makes here is the Supreme Lord's transcendental energy acts as his external, internal, and marginal energies. The Supreme Lord can turn the external energy into internal by his will. Therefore, by his grace, the external energy which is employed in illusioning those living beings who want to have it subsides by the will of the Lord in terms of repentance and penance for the conditioned soul. In other words, when we repent and we accept authorized austerities in Bhakti Yoga, then the Supreme Lord, by his will, has Maya Devi subside. And the very same energy then acts to help the purified living being make progress on the path of self-realization. The example of electrical energy is very appropriate in this connection. The expert electrician can utilize the electrical energy for both heating and cooling by adjustment only. Similarly, the external energy which now bewilders the living being into continuation of birth and death is turned into internal potency by the will of the Lord to lead the living being to eternal life. When a living being is thus graced by the Lord, he is placed in his proper constitutional position to enjoy eternal spiritual life. Evam janmani karmani hyakartur janasya cha varnayanti sma kavayo veda vikhyani ritpate. Thus, learned men describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive, which is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the heart. And just as the living entities' birth and so on are not what they seem, similarly the Supreme Lord's birth and so on are also not what they seem. Um, the Lord of the heart refers to the inner ruler, the super soul. Here, both the Lord and the living entities are essentially all spiritual. Therefore, both of them are eternal, and neither of them has birth and death. The difference is that the so-called births and disappearances of the Lord are unlike those of the living beings. The living beings who take birth and then again accept death are bound by the laws of material nature. But the so-called appearance and disappearance of the Lord are not actions of material nature, but are demonstrations of the internal potency of the Lord. So, in other words, both of them are exhibitions of Maya. But for the conditioned soul, they're exhibitions of external Maya. Whereas for the Lord, these are his births and so on, are exhibitions of internal, the internal potency. That's another type of, that is called Yoga Maya. So the Supreme Lord and his birth are entirely transcendental. And simply by meditation on such activities, one can attain realization of Brahman and thus become liberated from material bondage. Okay. 36. Savaidam Vishwam Amoha Leela Srajatyavatyattinna Sajjatesmin Bhuteshu Chantar Hita Atmatantra Shadvargikam Jighrati Shad Guneshaha. The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of the six senses and is fully omnipotent with six opulences. He creates the manifested universes, maintains them, and annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every living being and is always independent. Srila Jiva Goswami. Tarhi Jiva Ishwarasya ka visheshaha ko visheshaha. Then what is the distinction between the Supreme Lord and the Jiva? Swatantriyameva Vishesha Ityaha. It is his independence that is the particular characterization of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord's unique feature is his independence. The living entity is not independent, whereas the Supreme Lord is independent. Shadvargikam, Indriya Shadvarga Vishayam, Jigrati, Duradeva Gandhavat Granati, Natu Sajjate Tyartaha. The Supreme Lord, he, the word Jigrati, Jigrati means indicates that he is superficially attached to the various objects of material existence, the objects of the six senses, just like smelling the fragrance, meaning that when you smell a fragrance, you are not touching it. From a distance, you're smelling it. You don't touch it. So, like that. How is it like that? Because he is the master of the six senses. In other words, he is categorically transcendental, ever transcendental, not like the living entities. The living entities they can be transcendental or they can be materialistic, whereas that is not the case with the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord has six opulences: wealth, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He's the master of the senses. These are unique features that are not found in the living entities. He is connected with this material creation very superficially, as one smells odor without being connected with the odorous article. Nachasi kasyan nipunena dhatu ravaiti jantu kumanisha Utihi Namani Rupani Mano Vachobhi Santan Vato Natacharyami Vagyaha. The foolish with a poor fund of knowledge cannot know the transcendental nature of the forms, names, and activities of the Lord, who is playing like an actor in a drama. Nor can they express such things, neither in their speculations nor in their words. Nanu Kim Ishwarasya Srishtyadi Karmabhir Vishayabhogar Va Tatraha. So what the Supreme Lord, what is the need for him to engage in these activities or to experience the sense objects? So then it is explained that those who have less intelligence, uh, they do not understand the Supreme Lord's activities. He expresses himself in various forms and so on. But they cannot understand. That is why it is said, he is beyond the expression of mind and speech. And yet there are some men with a poor fund of knowledge who desire to understand the absolute truth by imperfect mental speculation and faulty description of his activities. To the layman, his activities, appearance, and paraphernalia, his appearance and disappearance, his names, his forms, his paraphernalia, his personalities, and all things in relation with him are mysterious. And this refers to both the karmis and the gyanis. And obviously, it refers to adharmic people also. Another is a third category. Animalistic people. At least these two classes of materialists, they are the karmis and the gyanis, they accept Vedic authority. But adharmic people don't. But for both of these groups, they cannot understand the Supreme Lord whenever he incarnates. So it is with the adharmic people are even more bewildered. Being deceived by the jugglery of the Supreme Being, the non-devotees who may be very dexterous in fruitive work and mental speculation are always in ignorance. So they cannot understand, no matter how much fixed they are in their respective disciplines, they are unable to grasp it. And because they are unable to grasp it, they don't surrender unto the Lord. And the Supreme Lord doesn't reveal himself. They consider him to be one of the great personalities in this world. They think that he must be one amongst many different celestial beings and so on. Bhaktastu katanchit janati tyaha savedeti. Bhaktastu. But a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he does understand to some degree. Saveda dhatu padavim parasya duranta viryasya rathangapane jo mayaya santatayanu vritya bhajeta tatvaja sarojag gandham. Only those who render unreserved, uninterrupted, favorable service under the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who carries the wheel of the chariot in his hand, can know the creator of the universe in his full glory, power, and transcendence. So now why do they understand? They understand because they are engaged in pure devotion service unto the Supreme Lord. Amayaya, akutila bhavena, because they are non-duplicitous, santataya, nirantaraya, and because they engage in devotional service uninterruptedly, anuvritya, anukulyena bhajeta, and they are serving him with a favorable attitude. So because of this, the Supreme Lord reveals himself to them to some extent. Everyone within the creation of the Lord is rendering service to the Lord indirectly or directly. But when we talk about devotee, we are talking of someone who's rendering service unto him directly or favorably. Favorably itself means under the guidance of an agent of the Supreme Lord. So therefore they can understand him. But other people don't understand. Even the Gyanis who are trying to realize the impersonal Brahman feature of the Lord, they don't understand. How come the devotee understands? Because Krishna himself guides these pure devotees. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. Bhakti marge pravrittan rishin abhinandati atheti. And then he congratulates the sages who have uh, begun to walk on the pathway of bhakti. Atheha dhanya bhagavanti tam yadvasudeve khila lokanathe kurvanti sarvat makamatma bhavam nayatra bhuyah paivarta ugrah. Only by making such inquiries in this world can one be successful, and perfectly cognizant for such inquiries invoke transcendental ecstatic love unto the personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of all the universes and guarantees cent person immunity from the dreadful repetition of birth and death. So all of you are successful, and you know everything that is meant to be known, because you have offered your minds unto Lord Vasudeva fully, absolutely. And when you do so, then you can become freed from the dreadful repetition, dreadful ugraha, garbhavasadi dukkharupa, such as having to reside within the womb of a mother, miseries such as this. And it's repetition, refers to the repetition of birth, death, old age, disease. So these devotees, they know him to some extent because they are submissive to the Supreme Lord. And he's now congratulating Shaunaka and the others. They know about him, the Supreme Being, his various potencies, his various expansions, and everything that they engage in will only turn out to be a success. Suta kimetat shastram apurvam kathayasi tatraha. And then he anticipates that they might be wondering, oh Suta Goswami, what is this scripture, this unprecedented scripture that you are describing, that you are speaking? Anticipating this, he speaks the next verse, text 40. Idam Bhagavatam nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishihi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swastyayanam Mahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam is a literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Brahma Samhitam, Sarvaveda Tulyam. It is Brahma Samhitam, which it means incarnation of Sri Krishna. Sridhar Swami has translated this to mean it is equal to all the Vedas put together. The sage here refers to Vyasadeva. Yes, it is compiled by the sage Vyasadeva. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that Srimad Bhagavatam is a spotless sound representation of all Vedic knowledge and history. Puranam Brahma Samhitam. It is a literary incarnation of Lord Sri Krishna and is therefore not different from him. Srimad Bhagavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Thereby we can derive the ultimate blessings of the Lord through its careful and patient study. As God is all light, all bliss, and all perfection, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. We can have all the transcendental light of the Supreme Brahman Sri Krishna from the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, provided it is received through the medium of the transparent spiritual master. Person Bhagavatam is a self-realized bona fide spiritual master, and through him only can one understand the lessons of Bhagavatam in order to receive the desired result. Tat sampradaya pravrittimaha. And then he describes how the Bhagavatam was, how the Bhagavata Sampradaya was inaugurated, how the disciplic succession of Bhagavata Shiksha was inaugurated. Tadidam grahayamasa sutam matma batamvaram sarva vedetihasanam saram samudhritam. Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the self-realized, after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. His son refers to Shukadeva Goswami. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is a factual description of authentic history, but it is not present in it does not present information in chronological order. Modern people, specifically Westerners, are obsessed with the chronology. But once you realize that there is a supreme being who is eternal, there are living entities who are eternal, there is the material world which is eternal, there is the force of time which is eternal, and that as long as the living entities are averse to the supreme being, they are caught up within material existence, and they have to experience karma eternally unless they turn away. Otherwise, it is eternal. So, from that perspective, from the perspective of eternity, chronology is very childish. Is a very childish consideration. Just like we don't very seriously note down, uh, except for the transport industry, the common people who may be traveling here and there, they don't note down all the flights and all the buses and all the trains and all the taxis, and you don't, you're not bothered about it because there's just too much happening. There's just too much happening, and it's going on for such a long period of time. If that is the case, what to speak of a situation where it is eternal? Therefore, for instance, in our current Kali Yuga, since the last 500 years, uh, let us say technology has developed. Let's look into this. But in every Kali Yuga, it's going to happen. So therefore, the Puranas don't bother about these kind of things. They only talk about things which are required to get the living entity, to convince the living entity to get out of material existence. There's nothing spectacular and wonderful about various happenings that happen in every Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga, because it happens all the time. So therefore, the Puranas, they are actually compilations of selective history. Selective history. They talk about uh, events that are useful, considering the different situation of different planets and also time and circumstances. There's nothing wonderful in the stories of the Puranas, nor are they imaginary. We should always remember the maxim that one man's food is another man's poison. We should not therefore reject the stories and histories of the Puranas as imaginary. The great rishis like Vyasa had no business putting some imaginary stories in their literatures. In Srimad Bhagavatam, historical facts selected from the histories of different planets have been depicted. It is therefore accepted by all the spiritual authorities as the Mahapurana. The special significance of these histories is that they are all connected with the activities of the Lord in a different time and atmosphere. Shukadeva Goswami, he was particularly selected by Vyasadeva because he was the best amongst the self-realized. Therefore, Vyasadeva, first of all, he taught Shukadeva Goswami. And he taught Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the essence of Vedic literature. Srimad Bhagavatam has to be learned not from academic scholars, PhDs, and so on in the universities. It has to be learned from those who are obedient to Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, Srimad Bhagavatam should be studied from Paramahamsas like Shukadeva Goswami, or at least his representative, who must be in the renounced order of life without a family burden. In other words, he should not be a person who uses the Bhagavatam in order to maintain himself and his dependents. Bhagavatam should not be heard from those who are not strictly in the Vaishnava discipline. Vaishnava Mukhodgirna Putam Harikathamritam Shravanam Naiva Kartavyam Sarpochishtam Yatha Payaha Satu Samshravayamasa Maharajam Parikshitam. Prayopavishtam Gangayam Paritam Paramarshibhihi. Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great emperor Parikshit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges awaiting death without taking food or drink. So he, Parikshit Maharaj, he had taken up the vow known as the Praya vow. This vow refers to giving up food or drink until one dies, until one leaves the body. Prayena mrityu paryanta an ashakena upavishtam iti parama vairagyoktihi. So from this we understand that Parikshit Maharaj was supremely renounced. In other words, Parikshit Maharaj was capable, and because he was capable of understanding the highest essence of the Vedic scriptures, therefore Shukadeva Goswami spoke the highest teaching. There is a principle which I must point out called one should instruct a person corresponding to his eligibility or his capacity. This is a general principle, a Vedic principle. We find it everywhere. Adhikarochita Shiksha is my own expression, but this principle is commonly recognized not just amongst Vaishnavas, even amongst the Mayavadis, and even outside, even among the Mimamsakas in the Vedic tradition. It is a well understood principle. The basic idea is that one should teach according to the eligibility of one's receptive audience. We notice this in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It can be best grasped by examining how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dealt with Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das initially was very young. He was a young householder. His father was, practically speaking, sponsoring the Gaudiya Vaishnava community in Nadia district. He was very favorable to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. Raghunath Das's father and his father's brother. Raghunath Das himself was very much inclined to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings and service, because his initiating guru, was Balram Acharya, who had accepted Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as his very life and soul. And on top of it, he, and more than that, in fact, apart from just this Kula Guru, Balram Acharya, he had the young Raghunath Das had the opportunity to serve Haridas Thakur. And he both served him, and Haridas Thakur would periodically come to Raghunath Das Goswami's father's place. So Raghunath Das developed a lot of attraction to the eternal service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he tried to run from home away. So we know that every time he tried it, his parents caught him up, arrested him. They got him married to a young, beautiful girl, and he had lots of money, extremely rich. And when it didn't work out, then once he met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Chaitanya told him that Batul na ho, don't act like a crazy man. You're a householder. You must, without attraction to sense objects, utilize them as required within the service of the Lord. This is essentially presented by Rupa Goswami in that famous verse, Anasaktasya Vishaya Yathartham Uyanjata, the principle of Yukta Vairagya. And Lord Chaitanya told him, at the right time, Krishna will bless you. So then after that, when Raghunath Das went home, He followed all the duties of a householder very meticulously, exactly as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed on Yukta Vairagya. 1 full year passed. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, in fact, describes a particular incident that had taken place to show how expertly Raghunath Das Adhikari followed this instruction very nicely. Then afterwards, Raghunath Das received the blessings of Lord Nityananda Prabhu at Panihati. This is the famous Chiradadi festival, we know. And then one day he had again attempted to run away to Puri. This time he was successful. With great difficulty, he walked to Puri. And somehow he managed to meet Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So at that time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so happy to see him. And he told Raghunath Das, "You were like a worm stuck in the stool pit of family life, but Krishna has saved you." Why didn't he say this last year? Because at that time, Raghunath Das was not ready for it. He was not capable. He was not eligible for it. So at that time, he had to hear the instruction on Yukta Vairagya. Now that he has developed spiritual realization and renunciation, now that he has come, now he is given a higher perspective. So then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arranged for his own servant Govinda to give him his own remnants, Mahaprasadam. So that goes on for some time, few days. Then Raghunath Das, he leaves it and he goes to Jagannath temple to take prasadam there. Then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "This is very nice because renunciate should be like this." Why didn't he tell him that the previous week? Because he was not eligible. You are given instructions according to your eligibility. So in that way, then it goes further. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes this even further and further. Then he stopped taking prasadam like that, and so on. There are different, it goes. I'm only summarizing, I'm only showing you bits and pieces. You can examine it in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The entire chronology, very nice it is. In fact, at one time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself comes to eat what Raghunath Das is eating, which is food which is rejected by the cows in the cow shed of Lord Jagannath at Puri. So, if you carefully examine that sequence of instructions, you will discover this, that he's always given an instruction which is just appropriate at his level. And then Lord Chaitanya, and then when he does something higher, then Lord Chaitanya okays it, and he himself says, actually the previous arrangement was wrong. So that is exactly how a guru and shishya are meant to interact. The guru is meant to teach the shishya, the disciple, whatever he is capable of receiving. So this principle is very well known in Vedic circles. So it is not that just because a guru says something, that's it, that's the end of the story. That guru, if he is bona fide, he will teach you what you need to hear. That is not the end of the story at all. That's only the beginning of the story, or maybe the middle of the story. So many more things may be there. So therefore, when there is a discussion of Shukadeva Goswami teaching Parikshit Maharaj, this point of Parikshit Maharaj's eligibility comes into picture. Because if Parikshit Maharaj was a person who was of a lower eligibility, then Shukadeva Goswami's instruction cannot be taken so seriously, because he's only encouraging him to come up to the point. But Parikshit actually has supreme renunciation, which is actually the eligibility to hear the highest teaching, highest or the greatest essence of the Vedas, because that is another principle which is taught in the scriptures, that you should teach the highest teaching of the scriptures only for one who is fully eligible for it, who is fully renounced. So Emperor Parikshit, the very fact that he engaged in the Praya vow, that itself gives evidence that Parikshit was fully ready for the highest. And that is how Shukadeva Goswami came to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. And therefore it was recognized by the various sages who had assembled there. because they also wanted to hear. Suta Goswami heard from Shukadev Goswami when he taught that Srimad Bhagavatam, the highest essence of the Vedas. Therefore, Shankaracharya did not touch the Srimad Bhagavatam because it was not, he was ordered to preach Mayavada, but he did not touch Srimad Bhagavatam. It's just too difficult, and it is the highest essence of the scripture, so he intentionally left it. Srimad Bhagavatam was heard by Emperor Parikshit, and it was recited by the able Shukadev Goswami. And both the speaker and the receiver of the messages of Bhagavatam were duly delivered by the same medium. Then, Krishne Swadhamo Pagate Dharmagyana Saha Kalau Nashtad Drishamesha Puranarko Dhnoditaha. This Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. So it is this scripture which is a direct representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. It is Krishna who was incarnated in the literary form. The Supreme Lord is the only one who can actually establish what is Vedic Dharma and what is not. Not that he manufactures Vedic Dharma. In the 6th Canto, Prabhupada writes, even Lord Narayana does not manufacture Vedic Dharma. These are not the exact words he uses, but he specifically says he does not manufacture. The principles of religion are not manufactured by Lord Narayana. The Vedas eternally exist, but it is the Supreme Lord who can establish it. He demonstrates it. He makes us follow it. And he makes sure that if you don't follow the Vedic system, you don't attain Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, Prema, nothing you get. So in so many ways, he actually ensures that the Vedas are properly followed. But the essence, or since the Veda starts from a conditioned soul in Tamoguna, brings him up to Rajoguna, brings him up to Sattva-guna, then brings him up to transcendence. And in transcendence also there is Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, Bhagavan realization. Brings a person up. Then one should understand that Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest essence. So it can bring a person to come up. Srimad Bhagavatam specifically presents Paramo Dharma, the supreme Dharma, real religion, as Prabhupada writes here. Real religion means to know God, our relation with Him, and our duties in relation with Him, and to know ultimately our destination after leaving this material body. Most of the people have no interest in anything which is which is distinctly spiritual. They're just interested in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Ahara, nidra, bhaya, maithanam. This is particularly in Kali Yuga. They don't even understand about anything about spiritual life. They can engage in sinful activities, and they are ready to become dogs in their next life. They don't care. So therefore, considering all this, the Supreme Lord, he presented Bhagavad Gita, and he arranged for Vyasadeva to present Srimad Bhagavatam. So in that way, the Supreme Lord has made arrangement to present the highest spiritual knowledge initially through an introduction. The Bhagavad Gita is an introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srimad Bhagavatam is an elaboration of the teachings of Sambandha, Videya, Prayojana. So these two books are extremely important. Even though Srimad Bhagavatam has been presented here as a representative of the Supreme Lord, Prabhupada, he also brings in the Bhagavad Gita into picture. If men in this age of Kali want to see the real light of life, they must take to these two books only, and their aim of life will be fulfilled. Bhagavad Gita is a preliminary study of the Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum of life, Lord Shri Krishna personified. Tatra kirtayato vipra, viprasher bhuri tejasaha, Aham chadhyagamam tatra nivishtastanugrahat soham vashravayishyami yathadhitam yathamati. O learned Brahmanas, when Shukadeva Goswami recited Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned from him and as I have realized it. Yathaditam, not to swamati vilasitam. I will speak as I have learned from him. I will not speak according to the whims of my mind. Tatrapi, even then, even though I'm going to speak what I've learned, yathamati, swamati anusarena, I will only speak according to my realization. These two principles are very important. Yathaditam, yathamati. One thing is to repeat that which you have learned. But that is, even though it is necessary, it is not sufficient. One should also speak according to one's realization. One should not speak that which he has not realized. He has to speak according to his realization. Yathaditam, yathamati. Sankshepatah, kathitam vistaratah shravayishyami. What I heard in a summary, that I will present to you in detail. One cannot learn Bhagavatam from a bogus hired reciter. In other words, one cannot learn Srimad Bhagavatam from people who are engaged, who are not celibate. Similarly, Bhagavatam should not be studied by going to some university and learning from some academic scholars. This is not how you understand. Again, scholarship is not the method. One must learn Bhagavatam from the representatives of Shukadeva Goswami and no one else, if one at all wants to see Lord Sri Krishna in the pages. That is the process, and there is no alternative. The word Nivishta means that Suta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Shri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. Just give me a minute. Just want to confirm something that is in my mind. Is it? No, why did I close it? Okay. Then, Turye Bhagavatarambha Karanattvena Varnyate Vyasasya Paritoshastu Tapah Pravachana Adibhihi. In the fourth chapter, it has been described that Vyasa was dissatisfied. And despite his austerities, his exposition, scriptural exposition, and so on. And it is described that this is the reason for his inauguration of his writing Srimad Bhagavatam. Chapter 4, the appearance of Sri Narada. Vyasa Vacha. Iti Bruvana Samstuya Muninam Dirgha Satrinam Vriddha Kulavati Sutam Bahrucha Shaunako Bravit. Vyasadeva said, On hearing Suta Goswami speak thus, Shaunaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Suta Goswami by addressing him as follows. So Suta Goswami had said, I will certainly teach you. And he had said that very happily. So therefore, since there are many people who are supposed who could speak, who could represent that assembly, the one who was the elder amongst the eldest and accepted as the Kulapati, the chief, and amongst them the one who had studied the Rig Veda, he was chosen because that is the scriptural principle. Here, he must be the leader of the house and an elderly man. Leader of the house means leader of the assembly house, must be leader of that entire community. And he must be an elderly man. He must be vastly learned also. See, age does have a role to play. We will see this later on in the third canto also. These are principles to note. Sri Shaunaka Rishi had all these qualifications, and thus he stood up to congratulate Sri Suta Goswami when he expressed his desire to present Srimad Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from Shukadeva Goswami and also realized it personally. So since he personally realized it and he would speak accurately, therefore he was congratulated for having taken up this task. Of course, realization doesn't mean one trying to surpass the predecessor authority. He has to present the same thing, but he has to present it in a nice manner to his own current audience. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. So Shaunaka, he understood what he meant by yathaditam yathamati. No learned man should be willing to hear a person who does not represent the original acharya. So here the speaker and the audience were bona fide. Previously also the speaker and the audience was bona fide. Shaunaka Vacha, Suta Suta Mahabhaga Vada No Vada Tambara Katham Bhagavatim Punyam Yadaha Bhavan Shukaha. Shaunaka said, O Suta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Shukadeva Goswami. He says Suta Suta twice because he was so joyful, so happy. They wanted to understand the Bhagavatam as it was taught by Shukadeva Goswami. In today's world, these Bhagavat Kathakas, the so-called Bhagavatam reciters, they're either professional readers, that means they earn money through it, or so-called learned impersonalists. In either case, they mess it up. Only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Shukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Shukadeva Goswami and as representative of bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Both have to be authentic. Even if the speaker is authentic, if the audience is not authentic, it won't work. Or if the audience is authentic and the speaker is not authentic, it won't work. Kasmin yuge pravritteyam sthane va kena hetuna kuta sanchodita Krishna kritavan samhitam munihi. In what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, he had already compiled Mahabharata and other dharmic scriptures. What was the reason for him to work out this compilation? So it was known to them that Srila Vyasadeva had already explained the text of the Vedas in various ways up to the Mahabharata for the understanding of less intelligent women, Shudras, and fallen members of the family of twice-born men. So therefore, they're asking, Why did he compile this literature? Because Bhagavatam is fully transcendental. It is not like the Mahabharata and so on. Tasya putro mahayogi samadrin nirvikalpakaha ekantamatirunnidro gudho mudhaiveyate. His Vyasadev's son was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Was it possible? You said that he taught this Bhagavatam. How is it possible for Shukadev to explain Srimad Bhagavatam and so on? So, in order to, they had this question in their mind, but in order to explain what it means, they first of all point out that Shukadev Goswami was absolutely indifferent to everything material. They do this in 2 verses. So he was a samadrik. He was equibalanced. He perceived Brahman. Therefore, nirvikalpaka. He was an absolute monist. In other words, he did not see any material variety. Because he was fixed in it. He was only interested in that. That is the only goal he had. And why was that? Because he was on nidra. He had woken up from sleep, meaning he had woken up from the sleep of nescience. Nescience means ignorance. This brings to mind the famous verse of Bhagavad Gita. That which is night for all beings is day for the introspective sage. Yanisha sarvabhutanam tasyam jagrati samyami tasyam jagrati bhutani sahanisha pashatomane. Therefore, Buddha was not exposed. Therefore, he appeared to be like an ignorant person, stunted person. So Shukadeva Goswami was on a totally different platform. He was a fully liberated soul. So his values and the values of the conditioned souls do not get along at all. They're absolutely different. The liberated soul is always engaged in the progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul cannot imagine the actual engagements of the liberated soul. While the conditioned soul does dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagement of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. A conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually they are differently engaged and their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or in self-realization. The conditioned soul is absorbed in matter, whereas the liberated soul is completely indifferent to matter. Drishtvanyantam Rishimatmajamapyanagnam Devyo Kriya Paridaturna Sutasya Chitram Tadvikshya Prichati Munau Jagadus Tavasti Stripum Vida Nato Sutasya Vivikta Trishte. Worship Vyasadeva was following his son. Beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions. Nirvikalpakatvam prapancheti. That he was absolutely indifferent to the varieties of material existence is now demonstrated here, elaborated here. So, when Vyasadeva was following Shukadev, then there were some apsaras who were bathing in the water. They realized that the sage had purified vision. He did not have any mundane, contaminated vision, as described in Bhagavad Gita. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavihasti, Shuni Chaiva Shvapake Cha Pandita Samadarshana. So these apsaras, they, by their special qualifications, they could sense that Shukadeva Goswami was fully transcendental. He had no lust in his body or in his mind. So therefore, they did not bother about dressing up in his presence. They didn't feel threatened. But when his father passed, they quickly dressed up, even though they were like his children or grandchildren. But because Vyasadeva, he behaved like a householder, therefore they also behaved accordingly. Shukadeva Goswami uh, was absolutely transcendental, fully renounced. And Prabhupada has noted here, as long as such distinction is there, one should not try to become a sannyasi like Shukadeva Goswami. At least theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. In other words, he should not pursue any sexual activity. So Shukadeva Goswami had already attained this perfection stage. Yeah, so they also, but he behaved like a householder. Therefore, they counter-behaved as girls uh, in Vedic Dharma, the way they are meant to behave with a householder. एवं भूतोऽसौ कथम् आलक्षितो ज्ञातः कथम् आलक्षितो पौरै सम्प्राप्त कुरुजाङ्गलाम् उन्मत्तं मूक जडवद् विचरन् गजसाह्वये. How was he, Srila Shukadeva, the son of Vyasadeva, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded? So how is it that he was recognized at all? How do they know that this is Shukadeva? Goswami Shukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it was very difficult for the citizens to recognize him in his exalted position. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. So he's not interested in speaking to those who would not obey him, would not obey his teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam. But externally, he appeared to be retarded, dumb man. He was recognized when the king recognized, and then suddenly the residents of Hastinapur recognized that this must be a very exalted soul. Katham va pandaveyasya rajarsher munina saha samvada samabhutada yatresha satvati shrutihi. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? So, what happened because of which King Parikshit met this sage? What was the root cause for their meeting? Esha Satvati Shrutihi. This transcendental essence of the Vedas. Srimad Bhagavatam is stated here as the essence of the Vedas. It is not an imaginary story as it is sometimes considered by unauthorized men. It is also called Shuka Samhita, or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Shukadeva Goswami, the great liberated sage. एतद्ध्याख्यानं बहुकालावस्थान अपेक्षम तस्य तु एकत्र अवस्थानं दुर्लभम. And this narration takes requires a long time. And Shukadev, it was very difficult for her to get him to stay in one place. So how did it happen? स गोदोहनमात्रं हि गृहेषु गृहमेधिनाम् अवेक्षते महाभागस्तीर्थी कुर्वन् स्थिताश्रमम्. He, Shukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify their residence. Tadapi na भिक्षार्थं किन्तु तेषाम् आश्रमं गृहं तीर्थी कुर्वन् पवित्री कुर्वन् तस्मादेवं भूतोऽत्र वक्तेत्याश्चर्यम्. Shukadeva Goswami would do this only to sanctify their residence. He would not go really to get any food from them. It is just to purify them. So they were very much astonished at the fact that Shukadeva Goswami became a speaker for 7 days. He became a speaker of such a long book, which must have taken at least a few days. So they were extremely surprised. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher, established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of God should learn that they have no business with householders, save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. That's directly from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Shrotustu charitam ativa ashcharyam atah kathaya ityaha abhimanyu sutamiti panchabhi. And the audience, Shukadeva Goswami's audience, Parikshit, his activities are extremely astonishing. To talk about him also. So with this in mind, they speak 5 verses beginning with Abhimanyu Sutam. Abhimanyu Sutam Suta Prahur Bhagavatottamam Tasya Janma Mahascharyam Karmani Chit Grinihi Naha. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first class devotee of the Lord and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. So Parikshit's birth was wonderful. Parikshit's activities were wonderful. In both ways, he was wonderful. His birth was wonderful because he was personally protected by the Supreme Lord Krishna. We will see that. His activities were wonderful because he could chastise the deity of Kali, the predominating celestial being, Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. And his death was also wonderful because he was informed of when he would die. And then on top of it, without being disturbed, he engaged in devotional service by hearing about the Supreme Lord without being disturbed at all. And during all the days he heard Bhagavatam, he did not take food and drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything is wonderful. So Samrat Kasyava Heto Pandu Nam Manavardhanaha Prayopavishto Gangayam Anadritya Dhirat Shriyam. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? He had the entire property that he had received from Maharaj Yudhishthir. Everything was going on well. There was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all these favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges fasting till death? Was he unhappy? Namanti yatpada niketamatmana shivaya haniya dhanani shatravaha katham savirya shviyam anga dustya jam yuvai shatot srashtamaho sahasubhi. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? So there was nothing undesirable. He could have just continued on. When he was young, at that time, he surrendered unto Shukadeva Goswami, heard Srimad Bhagavatam, left his world. Why did he do this? There was enough milk, grains, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency, so materially everything was satisfactory. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana jana. Jivanti natmartham aso parashraya mumocha nirvidya kutah kalevara. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of God live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So, even though the Emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was a shelter for others? This is not Chanadi, it's Dhanadi. What is the use of wealth and so on for one who is um, virakta, renounced? By himself, he never required it, but he had accepted all of this for others, for the happiness and the enrichment of the world, for, for their opulence. That is why great souls live. They don't live for selfish purposes. So, under that circumstance, why did the king give up the shelter for others in the form of his own body? Because that which is meant to provide sustenance for others should not be given up. Prabhupada explains the king was a typical example of a good devotee with all good qualifications. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession, but he was always busy in the welfare work of the public. He wanted to benefit them in this life and in their next life. He would not allow cows to be killed. He was not only protecting for. He was not only protecting human beings and allowing animals to be killed. He knew how to conduct his administration. He was not selfish. He was not self-centered, nor was he self-extended. He was only interested in representing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He wanted his subjects to become capable of going back to Godhead. It's like in Varnashrama Dharma. Varnashrama Dharma itself is like a community that follows Varnashrama Dharma. A society that follows Varnashrama Dharma is like a school, and it needs to be administered. A school requires an administrator. You have teachers, but teachers are not enough. You need to administer them also. You need to ensure that the students attend the classes and they progress from one grade to the next grade to the next grade to the next grade. Or as we say in India, from this standard to the next standard to the next standard to the next standard. So a king is very much required. Uh, Still, he gave up all these things. People were very happy with him. तत्सर्वं न समाचक्ष्व पृष्टो यद्दिह किंचन मन्यत्वं विषये वाचां स्नातं अन्यत्र छान्दसात्. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects except some portions of the Vedas. Thus, you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. So, please answer all the questions that we have asked you. We consider that you are fully thorough in everything that is taught in the Vedas, except for uh, that which appears within the Vedic mantras, the four Vedas. Prabhupada explains that Suta Goswami was a Parivrajaka Acharya. He was not just a regular or ordinary Brahman. So the Parivrajaka Acharyas, they are not very much expert in pronouncing Vedic mantras according to accent, meter, and so on. That the Karmakandiya Brahmanas are expert in, and that which they are meant to be expert in. That doesn't mean that these Brahmanas are more important. than the Parivrajakacharyas. But they are meant for different purposes. Not these brahmanas are not necessarily karmakandiya brahmanas, because in varnashrama dharma, both swanishtas and parinishchitas, they follow these principles. So one who is following the duty of a brahmana in varnashrama dharma, either as a swanishta or as a parinishchita, they have to follow these very carefully. But the nirapekshas, they are indifferent; they don't care. So a parivrajika, who is a nirapeksha Vaishnava, who's only interested in executing Bhagavata Dharma. Has no inclination for adharma, and therefore he's not inclined to engage in dharma also, varnashrama dharma also, material dharma also. He is allowed to uh, be this exception. He doesn't need to be expert in these things. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, all the Vedas are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being, and all the Vedas includes the Puranas and Itihasas. The only difference between the four Vedas and the Smriti is that the four Vedas are meant to be pronounced in a particular manner, according to meter, according to accent, whereas the Smriti or the Puranas, Itihasas, they do not need to be pronounced in that manner. That doesn't mean that Bhagavatam is inferior. Rather, it is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas. And Shukadeva Goswami is absorbed in studying Srimad Bhagavatam. So Suta Goswami, he is not inferior just because he does not know how to chant mantras from the Shruti portion. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. Kasmin yuge ityadi prashnanam vyasa janma kathanapurvakam uttaramasah dvapare iti. Sutovacha द्वापरे समानुप्राप्ते तृतीये युगपर्यये जातः Parasharad yogi vasavyam kalaya re. Suta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parashara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu. This is in response to the questions that the sages had asked. In which yuga was it spoken? Why was it spoken? And so on. So he begins by talking about Vyasadev's birth. When Dwapara had begun, in place of the third yuga. In other words, when the second millennium overlapped the third. There's a chronological order of the four millenniums, namely Satya, Dwapara, Treta, and Kali. But sometimes there is overlapping. See, look at this order. This is the regular order. But sometimes it is Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. During the regime of the Vaivasvata Manu, there was an overlapping of the 28th round of the four millenniums, and the third millennium appeared prior to the second. In that particular millennium, Lord Sri Krishna also descends, and because of this, there was some particular alteration. So Vyasadeva, he appeared at this time. Sat kadachit saraswatya upasprishyat jalam shuchihi vivikta eka asina udite ravi mandale. Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution, meaning morning ritual bath, in the waters of the Saraswati. So there was a real river, Saraswati, with water. At that time, it was there. And sat alone to concentrate. So he sat alone because he wanted to concentrate. This is the place of Badrikashram, Shamya Prasa. Paravarajyasya rishi kalena vyaktaram hasa yugadharma vyatikaram praptam bhuvi yuge yuge. The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unseen force of time. The great sages like Vyasadeva are liberated souls, and therefore they can see clearly past and future. So he could see the future anomalies in Kali Yuga, what is going to happen. Um, the basic point is they are too much interested in material enjoyment, which is temporary. Therefore, they don't understand what you should give more priority to and what you should give less priority to. भौतिकानां च भावानां शक्तिह्रासं च तत्कृतम् अश्रद्धदानान् निस्सत्त्वान् दुर्मेधान् ह्रस्तायुषः दुर्भगांश्च जनान् वीक्ष्य मुनिर्दिव्येन चक्षुषा सर्ववर्णाश्रमाणां यत् तथ्यौ हितममोघ दृक्. The great sage who was fully equipped in knowledge could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to the lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses and orders of life. So he saw that here are people who are going to be quite spiritually dull. Apart from that, matter itself is going to reduce its ability to give. The land does not produce food grains in the same proportions as it did in the other ages. The cow does not give as much milk as it used to give formerly. The production of vegetables and fruits is less than before. As such, all living beings, both men and animals, do not have sumptuous, nourishing food. Due to want of so many necessities of life, naturally the duration of life is reduced. The memory is short, intelligence is meager, mutual dealings are full of hypocrisy, and so on. In other words, there are subtle material causes. First of all, there are spiritual causes. Then there are subtle material causes. Then there are gross material causes. So here, by the force of time, since Kali Yuga is set in, there is not much piety. That is a subtle material cause, and that leads to a gross material cause. That matter does not give as much as it used to before. The land, the cow, and so on. Vegetables, fruits don't grow that much. The trees don't produce that much of vegetables, that much of fruits, and so on. So then, consequently, they don't eat sufficiently. Therefore, their duration of life is reduced. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, maximum 100 years as a general principle. So Vyasadeva, he could see through the scriptures that this is what is going to happen. He could understand this is what is going to be the problem, and therefore he wanted to work out some method by which they could derive some tangible spiritual benefit. They could somehow be upgraded. Somehow, Prabhupada gives this example of tuberculosis. It's a fact that there are a number of diseases which have come about just within the past few hundred years, much more than before. So, on one hand, while we pride ourselves as having cured several diseases, we have also we should also be embarrassed that there are a number of diseases that have come about due to modern methods of treatment. That is also there. Apart from that, there is a strong reluctance to listen to the teachings of pure transcendentalists like Shukadeva Goswami. That's another issue. I think I have completed my portion. Yes, I've done it. All right. I'll stop with this. Any questions? Otherwise, or you can also ask me in the. For some reason, I'm not able to access the chat box here. I don't know why. It's not coming up at all. I don't understand. No. If you have any quick question, just ask me. And how will you ask me? Even if you ask me, I won't get to it. I don't know what's wrong with this. Somehow my chat box alone is not active. I don't know if you can access your chat boxes. My chat box is not active. Anyway, if you have any questions, you can ask me individually. I'll try to answer it. If it's relevant for all students, I'll answer it in the channel. I should be spending more time. All right. Vanshakalpatarubhyasya kripasinubhyo paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Okay.